For Inside Carolina, I'm Taylor Vippolis, and this is a new podcast to the Inside Carolina lineup. Up in the Rafters, where 2017 ACC Player of the Year and National Champion Justin Jackson and myself will be talking about all things Carolina basketball. Before we get started, though, I just wanted to say thank you for being here. Be sure you subscribe to Inside Carolina wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube so you never miss out on any of the content the team at IC puts out. The support doesn't go unnoticed on this end. Speaking of support, we want to support the people that support us. So that's why I've got to mention our friends over at Johnny T-Shirt. When it comes to Carolina apparel, they have everything that you could possibly want. The T-shirts, the jerseys, the hats, you name it, they will probably have it. It's great people and great customer service since it's locally owned and operated by alumni. If you're going to be in Chapel Hill, you could visit them in person on Franklin Street. Or if you're not, you could always go online to johnnytshirt.com. And don't forget, Inside Carolina premium subscribers save 10% off their orders. It's up in the Rafters. As always, I'm joined by my guy, Justin Jackson. And Justin, UNC, after the Pittsburgh loss, has responded well with a nice little 2-game win streak where they pick up that they're always trying to chase that quad one win this season. They finally get it after, I think it was 7 attempts with a win at Virginia Tech. And then they kind of validate that win, beating Louisville at home. What's kind of been your biggest takeaways watching this Carolina basketball team over the past week?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, we've been kind of hard on them when it comes to some of their losses and things like that. But I think the first thing I got to say, man, I got to give them credit with these last 2 games. Kind of the big thing that I've really hampered on is like the competitive spirit that I've seen from them at some of those losses that they've had, or the lack of. These last 2 games, man, they've been competing. The energy level defensively has been on a different level. Offensively, making better decisions, executing a little bit better. So it's definitely good to see, but it just looks like they're a little more locked in now going down the stretch of these games.
Yeah, I think that's been a huge point for this Carolina team, where it seems like they're starting to put their foot on the gas to finish out the season. And I think everybody kind of thought this is the Carolina basketball team you would get with the coach like Hubert Davis and taking on his identity and being a effort and intensity guy. So I think it is good for Carolina fans seeing this team play well down the stretch outside of the Duke and the Pittsburgh game. This still is a team that has won, I think, like 8 of their last 10. And when you have that Saturday to Monday turnaround, we're seeing it more and more as the season kind of goes on. And it's something that teams are going to have to be prepared for if you want to play in the tournament. How difficult is it playing these high-level games on a short turnaround with UNC winning on Saturday at VT and then coming back to Chapel Hill winning on Monday?
Physically, it's a little bit tougher. You're not really used to playing games that quickly when you're in college. Obviously, you're used to playing, having 3 or 4 days in between games. But as a player, you kind of enjoy that. Like as a player, you just want to play games. Like practices start getting old after a while. And you're just kind of tired of doing like workouts and that kind of stuff. So I'm sure as a player, they're probably loving kind of that short turnaround. Obviously, physically, you have to have, take a little more time to recover with your body, whether it's cold tub, getting treatment, whatever it might be. But I'm sure as a player, they're loving it. So now to be honest, it's probably more of a challenge going from that to all of a sudden now they got to wait until Saturday to play against who's the NC State coming up.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's more of the challenge as opposed to the other way around, because now it's like, man, I'm kind of in a flow now, but now I got to find a way to stay in rhythm kind of throughout these 3 or 4 days that we have off until the next game. So I would probably say it's tougher the other way around.
After the Louisville game, Hubert Davis, he's kind of been making a point of emphasis on it this entire season, where this UNC team has to be able to validate their wins. Where UNC gets a massive quad one win. We're still trying to figure out what exactly a quad one win is over here. But UNC gets a massive quad one win for its tournament hopes, and then they do bounce back and kind of stack another victory at home against Louisville. From a confidence standpoint, how critical is it for the players that after a big time performance, you're able to again make enough plays in a hard fought game against a quality opponent in Louisville to come out with another win?
That's big time. Going back to the quad one, bro, I still don't know what makes the quad one win. So if a team beats UNC, is that considered a quad one win? Like, do we know this yet?
I think if a team beats UNC at UNC,
it's considered quad one.
Yeah, there's a metric where it's basically like if you're a team that's ranked like 1 through 30 and you beat them on the at your place, it's a quad one win. That's why the Michigan game has kind of been going back and forth, because Michigan's kind of right on that, like 28, 29, 30.
Gotcha.
And then if you beat a team on the road like Virginia Tech, that's like 1 through 75, that's a quad one win too.
Okay.
So the road wins do mean more in the quadrants.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I think coming off of, like we talked about before, Virginia Tech's a tough place to win at. So going in there and playing the way they did, winning the way that they did, and then turning around against a team that then even though they're struggling with, they got an interim coach, all that kind of stuff, Louisville they still came and battled, and so I think it was a great sign. For me, I'm just going to stick on just how much they competed. You know what I mean? Like we've talked about all season, how talented they are, what they can do whenever they're really locked in and when shots are falling and things like that. But the competitive spirit that they had all last game, was really what impressed me. And I got to give them the credit there.
Yeah. And the thing with Carolina basketball right now, I'm kind of enjoying, I don't want to say I'm enjoying being a team or covering a team or watching a team that's on the bubble, but there's something exciting about being on the bubble where it's like you start, throwing down other teams' resumes and being like, this is why Carolina should be in it. The bubble is, I don't want to say it's a toxic place, but it almost gets that feeling when you're looking at Joe Lunardi's bracket projections and you're seeing like the last 4 in, the last 4 out, and it's really just his projections are just as good as anybody else's, I think.
Yeah, man. When it comes to the bubble and things like that, I think toxic is the best word, because all you hear is, they have these big time wins and then all of a sudden they're like, but they have these losses, and then list all the terrible losses of the different teams. And you'll see some games in there that's like, wow, I don't know if they should be on the bubble.
Yeah. And then you have like the last 4 in, the last 4 out. It's just a lot of, it's bringing together a lot of fan bases once you start throwing out those graphics.
Yeah. I'm glad when I was in school, we were never in that situation. For me, it'd be nerve wracking. And obviously for the fans, I know it would be too. So fans, they just got to stick with it. Hopefully they win a few more big games and they don't have to be on that.
I remember playing those like NCAA basketball games, and like if my team was never that good, I remember how exciting Selection Sunday was. And like seeing your team pop in as a 12 seed and doing a victory lap and then getting your doors blown off against the 5 seed in the first round because the difficulty was probably way too high. But Carolina back in action on Saturday against NC State. They beat up on NC State really bad, where even the final score where Carolina beats them, I think by 20, doesn't really reflect how dominant that Carolina was in that game. If you're Carolina, how do you avoid the complacency that kind of comes with thinking, this is a team that we just beat pretty handily, and you might have your guard down, and then you're kind of opening yourself up for a letdown opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to kind of last week when we talked about like each and every game is extremely important now for UNC. There's really all season, there's no time for a let up, but there's really no time for a let up now in any of the games coming up. Very serious from the standpoint of each and every game is going on your record now, right? Like when we talk about you're in the bubble, you're last 4 in, last 4 out. um, it's every single game is going on that resume from here on out, whether it's a good win or a loss. So you lose to NC State, it might go down as a bad loss. You beat a Duke, that's a good win. You know what I mean? So for them, attack on the fact that it's a rivalry game, there really should be no let up, especially having this amount of time of a break to kind of get refreshed, get your body right. So hopefully they have that mindset going into this game.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing with this Carolina basketball team, with how up and down they've kind of been this season, the fact that they're still tied for third in the ACC, and when you're talking about them being a bubble team, it really doesn't matter if this team just goes out and kind of controls its own destiny. If they win these next two games, if they beat Duke on next Saturday to close out the regular season, if they make a little run in the ACC tournament, where you can't really be thinking of it as you're a bubble team if you're Carolina. But we're going to take a quick break. In the words of Tommy Ashley, we're going to let the national guys pay the bills. And when we get back, we'll be answering a couple questions I got from the premium members at Inside Carolina. Back at it, mailbag time. Thanks to any subscribers that sent in questions. First up, for fans that might not know all the X's and O's of basketball and just more so enjoy supporting the name on the front of the jersey from watching, how would you describe Hubert Davis's preferred style of play, and how does that differ from what Roy Williams did?
I love that question. First of all, whoever asked that question, thank you so much for admitting that you don't necessarily know the X's and O's, or maybe you're talking for another friend or whatever. But I think just the difference between them, Coach Williams had a certain system that he ran, right? So everybody knows the secondary break, back screens for the bigs. You had two bigs in there at all times that were posting up. The point guard really basically ran the show, and then defensively it was, okay, we play denied defense, we pressure, we trap, kind of that kind of thing. Now you look at Coach Davis's system that he kind of has running, which he still has some of the same principles, but you look defensively, they play more of a gap defense. They don't necessarily get out in passing lanes. They don't necessarily pressure as much. And then offensively, you see a lot more ball screens happening, which I think is good for the type of players that they have. A Caleb Love, an RJ Davis, Brady Manick setting the screens, and even an Armando setting the screens and rolling. So that's kind of the difference. I would say Coach Davis kind of has more of like, nowadays you see in the NBA and things like that, you see a ton of pick and rolls, you see a ton of, pin downs, all that kind of stuff. I think you kind of see Coach Davis bringing a little bit of that to the North Carolina system. But you can still see some of the same plays, back screen for the big, trying to get the ball in the post, kind of that kind of stuff. But I think with the team that he has, especially having like a Brady who's like more of a stretch four, he had to kind of change up the system a little bit and kind of, make it work for the players that are there right now.
Kind of going off those lines and working with the personnel you have, somebody else asked, in Hubert Davis's offense, what do you think is the most important position to recruit? And then they listed off like a true point guard, a combo guard, an athletic wing, a 3-point shooting wing, a four, stretch four, and then like a true post big. So where would you kind of rank the importance in terms of what Coach Davis is trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it always starts with kind of the head of the snake for me is always the point guard, because the point guard is going to be making the most of the decisions in those actions. So I think when you see like when UNC plays really well, you see RJ Davis, you see Caleb Love playing and making decisions like on a fly, and they make the right decisions, right? They're not just trying to get theirs. They're looking for the open guy, finding the open man, making the right read. Because then after they make their reads, then that's when everybody else comes into play. So I would probably say to start recruiting, I would say if you had to, it'd be probably the point guard. I think that's what I've kind of loved seeing the last two games is RJ and Caleb have really made those decisions at the right time. They're not pressing. They're not trying to do too much. They're just making the right read. But I think too, something that's big for a system kind of like Coach Davis, and you're kind of seeing the success that he's having as a guy like Brady, like a stretch four, somebody that can pick and pop, or somebody that can just extend the floor to open up the space for the point guards and guys that are trying to get downhill. So I'd probably say those two positions are probably the most important in my eyes, if you were going to try to recruit.
And that's interesting, because I think from my perspective, I would have thought it would be kind of like the athletic wing type players, because when I'm watching the NBA and thinking that it's similar to that with all the ball screens, like when I'm watching your guys' games in the NBA, it's like 2 through 5, it's like everybody's switchable.
Yeah.
It's just like everybody's like 6'9", 6'10", can jump out the gym, can shoot. The next question somebody said is, what is Justin's favorite Hubert Davis story?
Oh, my favorite Hubert Davis story. Oh yeah, I'm gonna put Marcus out there. Would that have been my freshman year? Yeah, my freshman year. So it was the year after he went crazy as a sophomore. So it was his junior year. My freshman year, he would say it a lot. Coach Davis would say it a lot, but I will never forget. I think it was the Iowa game at home where they blasted us. It was a green out, and we never saw green shirts ever again in our life. I don't even think we saw any of those green shirts. But we were in the locker room. It was a bad game for us. We were in the locker room at halftime, and we're sitting there, and Coach Davis, everybody goes through, and then Coach Davis comes up. And Coach Davis, if you've ever met Coach Davis is the nicest person in the world. But when he gets fired up, he starts getting a little louder. Like he doesn't really he doesn't go at you, but he gets like louder, right? So he starts getting a little louder. And he points at Marcus, and all of us are sitting there. He points at Marcus, and he's like, that guy right there, he's a pretty good player. He's a pretty good player. I think we should try to get him open. And then he starts basically saying, like, we need to start setting screens for him. We need to start getting him loose, all this stuff based around Marcus, right? And we're all sitting there like, bro, we're all playing bad. Like, why are we? But he was so focused on getting Marcus, who at the time was our best offensive player, getting him open and getting looks for him. And so that I will never forget. I give Marcus the hard time about that all the time. Like, because we went out there, and I kid you not, everybody was literally just looking to set screens for Marcus. We weren't trying to score. We weren't trying to do nothing. We were just trying to set screens for Marcus.
I don't know how the rest of this game is going to go score wise, but I'm gonna set some good screens.
I'm gonna set a screen. Coach Davis said he's a pretty good player. We need to get him open. So that's probably my biggest story from Coach Davis.
That kind of ties in perfectly to the second half page narrative, where he would always go off in the second half. Like, you guys might not have been screening enough for him in the first half.
I'm telling you, but this is the thing though. Marcus needs to give us partial credit for that narrative, because if it wasn't for us setting screens for him in that second half, he wouldn't have gotten off. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah,
maybe one day he'll give us credit.
Yeah. How would you compare Armando Bacot's season this year, where he has 21 double-doubles and counting, to this point in Bryce's senior year, where Bryce had 23 double-doubles, in terms of their style of play and in terms of their ability to kind of take over a game?
I think it's hard to necessarily compare their seasons. Armando has been a menace on the boards. I mean, it's you walk into a game and you automatically put him down for at least 12. I think Bryce kind of did it in different ways. Like Armando gets a lot of his off of the offensive rebounding. Like he doesn't. I wouldn't say that there's a lot of times throughout the game where they just drop the ball off into him and then he just goes and gets a bucket. With Bryce would get offensively on the offensive rebound, or we could drop it in there and his turnaround hook shot or turnaround jump shot was almost automatic, but I also cannot take anything away from Armando and what he's been doing. I mean, you said 21 double-doubles. that's impressive. You know, like that's something that you can't take any credit away, because that's something he goes out there every single game and he's going to do that. But I think they just did it in different ways. Armando kills people on the offensive glass, and usually that's where he gets all his putbacks and all of his looks. Bryce's hook shot, even though we always give him a hard time, he had one freaking move. His little hook shot was almost, it was money every time. So I think they just do it in different ways.
Yeah, he was. I feel like people almost forget like how good Bryce was that last year, and that leap he kind of took that his senior year. Because I remember thinking, like, when you guys were rolling in the tournament, you guys played Syracuse in the Final Four.
Mm-hmm.
That was my senior year too, and that was the least worried I've ever been for a game.
I think honestly, now that we're past it, and it's no disrespect to Syracuse, but we had already played them twice throughout the season and we had handled them pretty easily. I think that was probably the least worried that even we were as a team going into a game, which is crazy because it was the Final Four and they were a good team. They were playing well at that time. But yeah, I think the other difference, man, is like our team was so good, right, when Bryce was doing all of this. Now, a lot of that was from Bryce, right? If Bryce wasn't playing as well as he was, I don't think we would be nearly as good as we were that year. But we were so good that like a lot of the headlines was more about the team and like how well we were playing, as opposed to just how good Bryce is playing, you know? Unfortunately, with this team, like they've had some bumps in the road and things like that. So some of the only positives at times that they've had is that Armando is averaging a double-double, you know? So I think that's why Bryce didn't necessarily get the credit that he probably deserved, because we were freaking running teams out the gym, you know, left and right. So
yeah, the other thing with that 2015, 2016 season that I think some people forget is once Syracuse made it to the Final Four, I was like, oh, what a relief. Like, see you in the national championship, book the tickets. But Syracuse beat Virginia in the Elite Eight, where it's like, if Virginia wins that game, I'm sweating. The entire
we're
time.
all nervous. We're all nervous. Virginia was never a good matchup for
so it's kind of crazy how you had two polar opposites, where Virginia would have been a terrible matchup and a really competitive game versus Syracuse, and running out that zone and putting Bryce in the short corner and kind of letting him go to work for 40 minutes. The last question we had is that Greg Barnes from Inside Carolina, he's recently mentioned that the NCAA selection committee is relying less on the eye test and more on analytics and metrics and all those quad one type wins. Based on your experience of playing and scouting other teams, what would you rely on to select deserving NCAA bubble teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, analytics and all that kind of stuff, I think it definitely should be looked at. But I don't think the eye test should ever be taken away. You know, I think that there are certain teams in certain games maybe that they lose where it was just a bad game, right? Like they just didn't hit any shots, or the other team shot the crap out of the ball, you know? So I think from that standpoint, I think the eye test is something that should still be used, because at the end of the day, if you're only going off of, you might have a team that beat the number one team once or twice, right? But then they lose to a team that's like mid-major, you know what I mean? So it's like, I think that they both need to be used. Obviously, when you look at stats and things like that, they never lie. So those things definitely need to be looked at. The big wins and the big bad losses need to be looked at. But I think when you're really looking at a team, you have to really see what the team is made up of. And kind of when they've played really well, or when they've played, I guess I would say decent, kind of what they look like as a team. But I mean, that would be that'd be hard to be on that committee, man. Like I would not want to be a part of that committee, at least not known to be on that committee.
Yeah.
Because that'd be a difficult situation.
Yeah, not only are you keeping teams out that really would like to play in the NCAA tournament, but if people know you're on that committee, fans are going to be coming after you.
Coming after you. I don't want any problems.
So post playing career, no committee.
I won't be on one. At least I'm saying that right now to hopefully if I am on it, then nobody knows that I am. I will not be on the committee.
All right, that's this week's show. UNC at NC State tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern time from Raleigh, North Carolina. And we have that same turnaround again with UNC back home Monday against Syracuse. We'll be back next week to break it all down, as well as preview Carolina's final regular season game at Duke, Coach K's last game in Cameron Indoor. Justin, always appreciate the time.
Always a pleasure, man.